We are deeply privileged and honored to have Professor Randall Kroszner here all the way from Chicago, and he's with us today to talk about everything which is macroeconomics and then looking at some of the key issues from the regulatory side. I wanted to start from 2009.
Yes.
You were at the Fed.
Yes.
What about the sort of the early warning signals? I think there were some smoke signals out there. And was it hubris? Was it arrogance? Was it, everybody was just very comfortable with what was going on because they were good times. Was that the reason why we just didn't engage?
Yeah, one of the interesting things was that, like the housing market, of course, was one of the areas that a number of people were concerned about. And so we got a false sense of confidence by looking globally and seeing that, well, the US was actually not an outlier.
Yeah.
There were many countries that, almost 10 countries, major countries, that had higher house price growth in the early 2000s than the US had. So the IMF had done a study, we had done a study, and instead of saying, oh my goodness, there's a problem in housing all throughout the world, that there's this common risk factor, we said, phew, the US is not an outlier, so we're okay. That was the wrong lesson to draw from that. We should have seen that what had happened over time is all these global interconnections grew. And so instead of saying, oh, well, we're not the outlier relative to the rest of the world, the challenge was the world was getting too excited about housing. There was too much frothiness. And so then, because of the global interconnections, a weakness in any part then spread throughout the world.
Let's take a big world view of things. The world economy, the GDP is about 80 to 90 trillion, expected to grow at about 50% over the next 20-25 years because of all of the digital transformation that's going on. Are the regulators ready for that level of growth? What do we need to be ready for as we look into the future?
Well, one of the key challenges is a lot of that growth is going to be outside of the traditional large countries. So it's going to be in China, it's going to be in India, it's going to be in emerging Africa and the Middle East. And so that means that a lot of regulators and a lot of infrastructure will have to be developed and get smart quickly that haven't had the experience from before. And so I think that's going to be one of the key challenges, is to make sure that the lessons that the major countries are still learning and hopefully implementing are well portrayed to the rest of the world.
We talk a lot about fintech, and I dare say you encounter it. A lot of the organizations, institutions are just not quite ready for it yet, both in terms of the legal and the jurisprudence of that, governance, and just understanding and learning and how to implement that. How do we bridge that challenge, and what do we need to do? What do companies need to do in the meantime?
Well, I think you're right. There's something that's outside of what the firms can do, which is the legal infrastructure. Exactly how do you enforce contracts? What does it mean if there's a theft on one of these exchanges, and it sort of exists not under one country's particular jurisdiction. And this has been one of the challenges that some of the cryptocurrencies have had. What is the relevant jurisdiction? So what you might want to do is be very careful about where you operate. You might want to work with the local regulators to try to build an infrastructure on that, so that people know what they can and what can't be enforced.
My final question is about your students. You're deputy dean, you're a professor, you talk to them all the time. And again, going back to all of the skills that we have learned in the past, and we talk about numerical and verbal skills, but now we need multiple intelligences. We need a completely different set of rules of ethics and humanity and values, and particularly in the financial and economic world, because more and more, as AI is becoming stronger, this is becoming so critical. How do you teach ethics to your students?
So that's an incredibly important issue, and so one of the things that we've really developed at the business school is our behavioral sciences area. And so, like for example, Richard Thaler just got the Nobel Prize a couple of years ago, and one of my colleagues and his colleagues is doing some brilliant work on something called ethics by design. And so, because we often think of, well, ethics is about a few bad apples, some people acting badly. And there are a few bad actors, but that's not what goes wrong. When firms do things that are really problematic, it could be a few bad people, but there's something wrong with the structure of the institution. And so thinking about the incentives of the institution, thinking about the designs of institutions, of how you get more ethical behavior. There can be other exercises that are done, but it's really thinking very much about the design of the organization of itself, because it's not just a few bad apples, it's the organization.
Do you think MBA is basically a degree of yesterday rather than a degree of the future? Why shouldn't we be looking at management of business intelligence or management of master of business business thinking as opposed to administration? Administration is surely going to robots and so on. We need to be thinking, we need to be connecting, we need to be feeling, as opposed to administrating. So how has that shift happened?
So our curriculum is transforming all the time. For example, entrepreneurship was something that people didn't really talk very much about a quarter century ago. It's now the largest concentration of our MBA students. Mm-hmm. Analytics is something that the students are really focused on, which gets very much to the point about AI and thinking about cryptocurrencies. It's really amazing to see the transformation, for example, of marketing. Mm-hmm. It used to be about kind of picking out whether the packaging should be red or blue. Mm-hmm. Now it's all about data. It's all about the analytics. Yeah. We recently started a joint program with the computer science department where people can get a joint computer science and MBA degree. So I think that's how we're transforming. Even though the name of the degree is the same, the curriculum is transforming. And also our students are driving that because they're making other choices. Finance is no longer the largest concentration. Sure. It's entrepreneurship.
Super. Professor, it's been a real pleasure talking to you. Our company is called MAD Talks. MAD stands for Make a Difference, and we are making a difference, and I can see you're making a difference in the lives of so many people. We're really, really happy to have you here. Thank you, sir.
I'm so delighted. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for your